We're here now, we're live. This is the American Hat Factory. This is something special that everybody should see. And we're going to take you in and show you what's going on in here. We got Brother Art, he with us. A camera guy.
Absolutely.
X. You have to get down here, people. The American Hat Factory LLC. This is a beautiful place and it's hidden. You got to come out now.
All right. In your own words, tell us a brief history about your background and your upbringing.
Well, I was born in Mobile, Alabama, and my grandparents took me home from the hospital and raised me. My grandmother was a real Southern belle and very active with the women's movements. She was a member of the National Council of Negro Women and the Links. And my grandfather was a Pullman porter, and so he was busy working with A. Philip Randolph to develop the union for the black porters. And so I imagine that I would say that that's how I developed so much tenacity and strength, because even though it wasn't always articulated to me, I watched the two adults around me that were responsible for shaping my life do so many phenomenal things. And my grandmother used to dress me up and take me to all of the meetings of the National Council or the Links, or anytime she went to a woman's meeting, I went with her. So I was always being dressed up in, pretty little dresses and ribbons. And I was telling someone once before that I think it was considered grown for girls to wear hats before they reached, I guess, around 10 or 12, because I always wore bows in my hair. My grandmother, every dress I had matching ribbons. So I didn't really start wearing hats until I was a little older. And certainly I continued to wear hats because it's something that my grandmother did. She wore a hat to work in the garden. She wore a hat to go downtown shopping. And she wore a hat, of course, to church. And she wore a hat to conduct any kind of business. So,
What is it like to work at the American Hat Company?
well, working at American Hats LLC is first of all a joy for me because I love hats. So every day it's like coming into, like a kid who goes into a candy store, just looking at the vibrant colors and shapes of the hats. It's also very comforting for me, and I think that's because a hat represents my grandmother, Dr. Dorothy Height, who was my mentor. So I think being in this place gives me a certain amount of comfort during the most difficult times when businesses that experience what I experienced in the early years, they shut down and closed. I think because I felt so secure here, I didn't panic and I could work it out, and did work it out.
This is a beautiful place. You see all the hats, and she's going to explain to us. Come on, let's just have fun.
All right, let's talk about, like, this is what you would oftentimes see a woman wearing to the Derby or Easter. This is a church hat. This is kind of a standard classic hat with a wide brim. We get more fancy, and everything is made here from scratch. We're going to show you how we start the making of a hat. All the hats are made here. The materials are purchased here in the U.S. And so it's truly a made in America hat. That was one of the reasons that we wanted to call our company American Hats LLC.
You're so used to saying made in China, this is made in America.
Absolutely. So this hat is unique in that this bow is going into the brim and coming out the back. So we have some very creative designs, and we can do custom work. We can make pretty much anything anybody wants. You can see we have all kinds of colors. We have almost all the colors in the rainbow. We've got our royal regal purples here.
What are some of the things you could tell us about being a young lady in Harlem, New York?
Wow, well, going to Harlem from Alabama in the late 50s and early 60s, it was a very spectacular place and experience for me, because the men and women in those days were always dressed impeccably, and even though many of the individuals in our community would work out maybe on Long Island or downtown for white families, they would get all dressed up on Friday night and Saturday, and they would go to the Savoy. Not far from where I lived was the Savoy club, where people went to dance, and then there was Small's Paradise. And so as a teenager, I used to just walk Harlem. I would walk from my house at 158th Street and Amsterdam Avenue all the way down to Central Park. I would go down 7th Avenue, and some days I would walk down Lenox Avenue, so that I could just see all the phenomenal black people, because like I said, men looked great. They had on sports jackets and suits and ties, or even if they just had on, blazers with shirts. But men always looked so sharp, and women all wore hats and gloves and carried their purses, and everybody just looked wonderful. So I always enjoyed that. We actually have a summer program. We're partnered with Dobbins Institute, and so we get 5 to 6 students for the summer, and they come and we teach them all the aspects of the factory. Last year we had 2 students who, after several weeks, actually were able to make a hat.
Oh, wow.
So now we're looking to have them come back, rather than just get 6 new students. We've requested that we bring those students back so they can continue to learn the business.
So, would you ever employ them, have them working?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. We don't want to, you have to be careful with young people. When they start making money, they kind of get sidetracked from education. I know that's what happened for me. And so it's important that they finish and focus on their education and have this as an outlet. And then once they graduate, then we can look at, if they don't desire to go to college, then we can look at them coming here as employees.
It seems that what you're describing may be sort of related to the vestiges of the Harlem Renaissance in some way.
Absolutely.
So how did it help to shape your self-image?
Well, it definitely affected my sense of fashion, because as a junior high school student, I was always dressed up. And when I went to high school, I went to a business-oriented high school on 42nd Street. So I went to high school dressed up every day with knit dresses on, and I wore a hat in high school. I wore this leopard turned-up brim hat. But the evidence of the Renaissance was the spoken word that I couldn't get into some of the places where spoken word was going on, but I would stand at the door of different establishments to listen. And so it impacted me to the degree that I began to write myself. So from junior high school through college, I was an avid poet.
Oh, wow.
And I wrote all the time, and that came from reading James Weldon Johnson and Langston Hughes and so many others, Lawrence Dunbar, that when you would read those things, it just made you want to put pen to paper.
Wow.
Quang actually has been here at the factory for almost 30 years. 25 Quang?
Not 30, 26.
26 years.
26 years, yeah.
So she knew, and all of the ladies, all of the gentlemen and the ladies that worked here really knew how this place operated. It's just that it hadn't been their responsibility and nobody had allowed them to run it. But what I said to them was, clearly, you know more than you realize you know. And so as a result, they were able to tell me lots of things that I needed to know in terms of keeping the factory going.
Wow.
Down here, Miss Lord is actually making the trim. So everything that you see on our hats, it's made here. So here we
So
see
we
that.
have different stations here.
Right.
Different things.
Right. So here, this is crowns. Maggie made these crowns earlier. And then she also made the brim. And so then tomorrow our blocker will be here. We'll walk over to the blocking station and this hat will be blocked and then it will be returned over here to be connected where you see Miss Quang and Doe is. That they do the connecting of the crown and the brim.
Now, what inspired you to get into the hat business?
I think I was like 67 because I've owned this factory for 3 years. And so I was thinking about retirement and I was thinking that I want to do something, but I want to do something fun and enjoyable now. And so my milliner who made my hats had been a designer for S&S. And so she told me that the factory was closing down. And so I thought about it and I was like, I'll buy it. And so I bought it.
Wow.
We are broken up into, you have your baseball cap factories that they strictly make baseball caps. That's kind of like the 6-part fabric cap. And then you have some other factories that make uniform, like my colleagues, Keystone, they make uniform caps. So they make the caps that police and firemen wear. And then we make constable hats for like say Curacao or Caribbean countries where they still wear the little constable cap. I'll show you one of those in a moment.
Do you also ship hats out of the United States?
We do. We ship hats to the Caribbean and to Canada.
Oh, this is wonderful. You have to get down here, people. The American Hat Factory Llc. This is a beautiful place and it's hidden. You got to come out now.
Yeah. So the sewer has.
You see this? This is beautiful.
A real derby hat.
This is a real derby hat.
So the sewer would stop with this material and then start sewing this and then stop, and so each time you stop it takes a little longer to complete.
I know that took a couple hours.
Yeah, this did.
Could you tell us anything, just briefly, about your history at Mosque Number 7 in Harlem, New York, under Malcolm X? In what ways might that experience have inspired you, in terms of your work and in terms of your sense of self?
Well, for one, it was a very empowering experience. I was on a journey. I started out as a Christian. My grandparents raised me in the AME, the African Methodist Church. And so when I was in high school, I started studying evolution. And then I started to really get away from my spiritual roots. And I remember, God is such a good God because, I'm a minister. and God actually continued to love me when I was busy running around saying, God is dead. Is there really a God?
Wow.
And so I went through that period. And what happened when I came home from college, a few years later, unfortunately, I was in an automobile accident, and I was in the hospital. I was paralyzed, and there was a brother who was a Muslim who gave me the Quran, and I started reading the Quran. And because I was an avid reader of the Bible, I immediately saw all of the connectedness.
Right.
And so even though I was still quite rebellious, I began to embrace the Quran. And then once I recovered and I was able to operate 100% again, I began to go to the mosque. And it was extremely empowering for me because at that time I was listening to Malcolm, and then the fruit of Islam was very much inspiring and motivating, because to see the brothers, walking around with their heads up and speaking so powerfully and with so much relevance, because while I was in college, I was involved in civil rights movement, and so I actually had gotten sort of run out of North Carolina because of all of the dissidents that I was involved in, and the schools said that they were being threatened and that they needed to be able to say that I wasn't there anymore. I've been working with Brother Ben Chavis on campus, and was involved in helping to establish the second March on Washington. And so when I came home, I was still looking for that ability to advocate, and so going to the mosque was very much inspiring and motivating, and continued to keep me rooted and strong, because it was sort of having to leave school. I got a lot of subliminal messages. One was that speaking out could cause adverse situations for me, but I also became wise, and I learned that maybe I shouldn't always say everything, and that I had to learn to operate without always promoting or announcing what my thoughts and my intentions were. And the mosque was a very good place, because my memories of being in the mosque was that even though there were brothers who spoke very powerfully and had very powerful sermons to give, there were also times when I remember just being able to meditate, and when I was in prayer, and just to have that time to be completely engulfed in my spirit. And so being a member of the mosque was just very empowering for me. It taught me also, or reaffirmed for me, what I learned from my grandmother, which was that men were to be leaders in our lives and in our homes, and that women were to be helpmates and to be submissive. And I have a lot of women who, it's like, oh, come on, I'm not going to be submissive. And I say to them, being submissive is not being weak. My grandmother was not a weak woman, but my grandmother, who could do anything she wanted to, because I watched her as I grew up. And when her friends wanted to go somewhere and go shopping to Mississippi or my grandmother would always say, oh, I have to ask, let me check with Alec. Let me ask Alec what he thinks. My grandmother would go home and say to my grandfather, oh, Martha and Alice want to go down to Meridian, and what do you think? And my grandfather would puff on his cigar and say, whatever you want, Pauline. And as a little girl, little girls get fresh. I spoke up one day and said it to my grandmother. It was the first time I remember getting hit, because I said, you don't have to ask him. You can do whatever you want to. Granddaddy said so. And my grandmother swat at me. But as I got older and became a woman, I understood the value. And I realized that my grandmother's deep respect for my grandfather embodied the great respect and love he had for her. And the submission that she gave to him because of her love for him was returned to her in his desire for her to have anything she wanted. She had 2 stoves. She had an electric stove and a gas stove.
Wow.
She had television. Everybody in our neighborhood came to our house to watch television.
Wow.
So the message that I try to give to young women today, that when we stop competing with men and women competing with one another, and then we are able to begin to foster better relationships and stronger unions, and then we become more powerful, and our relationships become stronger, and then we become strong in relationship and union, strong in family, which is what we need, not just in our community, but in our nation right now.
personal sacrifices that you had to make in order to maintain your business and to be here and remain the way that you have?
Well, one of the biggest is financially. I worked 16 hours a day most of my life.
Wow.
And I was fortunate when I was in midlife to learn about investing and saving, and so I was able to invest money. But this factory took to purchase it a large portion of my savings because I'm not financed by any bank. I self-financed.
Self-financed.
And then when we lost our suit companies, we had two women's suit companies who brought in about $100,000+ annually. They went to China. So then for a year, I had to literally supplement the payroll in order that I pay my people. So, and I travel from New York, and I used to travel almost every other day. I'd get up at 3:30 in the morning and get on a train at 5:15 to get here by 7:30. So it's been a major, and I mean in the snow, when we first lost our customers, and that revenue, we lost such a large, most businesses don't survive if they lose $92,000 in revenue. We lost that money. I used to leave here and walk to the SEPTA. I'm a woman who was accustomed to having a car, driving my car, somebody driving me, but I couldn't afford to take the Amtrak train like I had been doing every morning. So I learned about taking the SEPTA train to Trenton and getting on the New Jersey Transit so that I reduced my costs from like $160 a day to 15, $16 to $16 a day. Those are the things I did to survive. I'd be sitting out there in the SEPTA, freezing cold, my fingers would be numb, my toes would be numb, and those are stories that I would tell my granddaughter to let her know what perseverance brings forth. Because here it is 3 years later, and I'm still here. As a matter of fact, we're getting ready to go to the Center City. We're opening in the new Fashion District Gallery Mall. So determination and sacrifice and struggle has paid off for me.
Absolutely, yeah. I wanted the young people to understand what the sacrifice is and what it takes, which is all the more reason to come down and support. We have to see this lady, we have to see this business and factory, and we have to support.
It's very important because
Tell me the address. All right.
right, we're at 2251 Fraley Street, and it's important because the more hats we sell, the more people we can hire. It's been a struggle to keep our staff who were here when I purchased this factory, but I made a commitment to them, and I said when I bought this factory that I would keep their jobs, and I have to keep my word. I was taught that your word is your bond, and so it might be easy to walk away, but I'm not going to. I fight for what belongs to me, and that's what we learned to do in Mobile, Alabama. Fight for it.
Absolutely.
How long have you worked here? And can you tell me more about your background and the role you play here?
So I bought what was known as S&S Hat Company. S&S had been here in Philadelphia since like
1923.
Right, exactly. So I'm really very honored. I love history. And so one of the things that I was honored to be able to purchase, a company with that kind of legacy. And so even though we changed the name to American Hats LLC, we still acknowledge S&S on our website and in anything that we do, because there had to be something before me. I didn't start this. S&S really started this factory, established it here in Philadelphia, and so we have just come along now to carry it forward.
So it wasn't in the same place where it is now. Is it a different location?
No, it's here.
Oh, wow.
S&S started out in downtown Philadelphia, And I don't know the exact year that they moved from downtown to northeast Philadelphia, but of course, like anything else, because of the increases in rents and things like that, they found it necessary to move the factory in this area. And this area is exactly that. It's a manufacturing area, an industrial area. So when they moved here, they continued to do business. A lot of the business was done, shipping goods across the country. But I think that they did not realize that they lost their retail business when they came up here. And so I think that was part of what caused the company to find itself in a position to be sold. So let me show you our blocking area.
The blocking area?
Yeah, so after we sew a hat, we bring it over here.
Now what is the blocking area?
So the blocking area is where the hat take its permanent shape.
Okay.
The ladies sew the ribbon over crinoline, and crinoline is what's inside of the satin.
Okay.
And that's what makes it formidable. And so then that shape that we saw Maggie making, which we use these blocks here.
These are called crowns.
Yeah,
right?
this is the block for a crown.
This is the block for the crown. This is for the hats. This is where they get the shapes from.
Right.
This whole shelf is where they get the shapes from to make the hats. Wow.
Ventured into making men's hats. So this is the teardrop that's kind of standard for a man's fedora. And so we do those, and then we have like a Humboldt, and then here's again another men's crown. And so the blocker would put this felt or satin in here in the block, and then they take this rope and they go along and they put this rope around the rope line all the way around the hat.
Wow.
The block rather, going all the way around, and then that's how it begins to have its shape. There is actually a demonstration of Nick, our blocker, blocking with the heat on and all, and so you can actually see what he does and how the steam is coming up. The hat is shaped, is roped. The blocker will take this whole block with the material on it and stick it in the oven. First,
at what degrees?
First it goes in the steamer and it gets steamed and moist.
Then
the oven is to dry it, and then the hat holds its shape at that point permanently.
This will be aired. Thanks for watching A Vision Entertainment. Do you want to give them your emails or social medias? Do you have
Yes, please follow us on Instagram, on Facebook and Twitter, and also you can go to our site at www.americanhatsllc, and you can see the diversity on our site. Every woman and man is represented.
You got to come on down. You can get all types of hats, men, women. But I got my cap on right now. Oh man, here's another one.
That's
yeah, that's
I don't really wear hats too much, but I like this one.
I can wear that.
Yeah.
It's called a stingy brim.
Yes.
I don't even know the name of the hat, but it's nice though.
It definitely is.
Yeah.
Stingy brim.
Absolutely.
The American Hat Factory Llc. Come on down. Don't forget to come down to 2251 Fairley Street. We are here at the American Hat Factory LLC with co-host Arthur Carr. We'll see you back in a few minutes.